Hello, hi guys. So finally, we're starting off with session two of the live video for how to draw human figures. I hope you guys checked out session one, where we spoke about just the basic structure of what these figures should be like and how to understand twist and bend and balance. Today, we're going to talk about a little more how to add a little volume to your figures. So, we're going to get started in a bit as some of the people come in. We're just making sure that everyone can kind of watch this live. If you can hear my voice and if my volume is good, visual is good, you can see my screen, then give me a thumbs up on the chat and I'll know that everything's okay. That would be very helpful. So, while we wait for more people to join in, I hope that you guys found the first video very helpful and I hope that you guys learned something. So there are many ways that you can kind of draw figures, and there are many artists who have their own approaches to uh, talking about what figure drawing is and what is the way to approach it. Uh, we are doing it the way we know best. Like I have learned figure drawing using tutorials and watching videos and kind of practicing on my own. So a lot of what we do is stuff that I've learned from my experience, and it's there's no hard rule to how you should approach it. There are just rules of how the body functions, but you can approach your artwork however you think works. We will talk about some do's and don'ts again today so that you can approach the process more easily. If you don't agree with them, you can always experiment and try new processes, and maybe that will help you guys out. All right. Good. So we have about 10 people in, I think, already. So that's a good time to get started with the video. Last time, I think we had to wait a little bit. So the first, I think, 30 seconds or a minute of the video was just silence. So this time I just started talking as soon as we got in. All right. We're going to see if we can keep this for an hour and talk about all the things that we need to in figure drawing. If so while you guys are waiting, if you want, if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, please subscribe to our channel. You can find that link below. You can also find links to our Patreon page where you can support our work, and you can also get a lot of goodies. If you want us to review your work, there is a Patreon support option where you can review the work. We will review your work once a month if that is something that you would like us to do. So yeah, also check out our Instagram page for all the actual animation and stuff that we do. This is something, training videos is something that we just started so that we can help you guys out with the work. So awesome! I'm seeing a lot of thumbs up, which is great. Which means you can hear me, you can see the video. So we'll probably get started today. Let's see. So what are we kind of working on today, right? Let's talk about that. The last time we did this session, we did this. Let's say, let me draw something here. Let me kind of. Right, if I just draw this little figure here. So last time we kind of covered all of this, or let me change the head direction a little bit. Right, and we spoke about the way the spine bends. I hope you guys had a chance to practice some of this, right? And if I put my arc here, right, and then we can kind of push this in the back. So this is what we kind of did last time. What we're kind of going to move forward with this time, what we're going to get to by the end of this class, is to see how we can do this exact same figure. I'm probably going to run out of space on this sheet. I should plan that better. All right, we're going to be a little more cleaner about our work. So we're going to do this time. We're going to be able to kind of build volumes around what we think our forms should be. So we're going to talk about all of these things in the session today. And we're going to just kind of build that. All right. So we're going to kind of cover this. This is largely what we're going to get in today's session. We're going to talk about what are the important things to keep in mind. We're going to talk about volumes, because what this helps us with later, just to kind of give you a very quick idea on this, is this will help us build our character in terms of volume. But we're not going to cover all of the anatomical details that go into this. We're going to just talk about how to build that cylindrical structure, right? So how the cylinder helps us is through this. It kind of helps us build these shapes and build these forms over a cylindrical structure that we've already created. So the cylindrical structure helps us with building that the right volume and getting our pieces together, right? So we're going to talk about, again, we're going to talk about hip and torso movement. We're going to talk about how the hand moves this time. Last time we completely ignored the hands. So we're going to talk about how the hand moves this time. We're going to talk about where the position of the knee is and how important that is, how to build space for your butt and kind of fill the spaces in between. All right. So, like if I hide this, you kind of see that structure is already forming at the end. So, let's ignore that. Let's kind of move ahead to what the meat and potatoes of this class is, the basic structure of our character. All right. So as last time, the same thing that we did the last time. And also, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to mention them on the comment section, on the chat section on the side, and I'll read them and I'll help you guys with these things. Right. So the basic structure, as we've always had, we're going to have the head. I'm going to keep this so that we can keep this guy always on the side. I'm going to draw this in. This is the cross that we already had. We had the shoulders last time. This is again something that we had before. So I'm going to keep that here. We had the hip, right? We had the legs and feet here. This feet here. We had a spine here. So if you remember, this was what we kind of spoke about last time. This kind of forms here. This forms here. These are all in last time's class. Why these relationships are necessary, right? Now, what we're going to add on top of this is a basic cylinder. So last time we added a small box, and I said wherever that box is, that doesn't matter. Now this time, where we add that box is going to matter. So we're going to kind of cut it midway over here, and this hip, I'm going to slightly lower and kind of cut it here and connect it all the way up here. So this is the dividing line for my torso. We're going to have now, similar to this will of course have the plus sign. This will also have the plus sign. If you remember from last time, the plus sign helps us with the twist of the body. Now for the hands, I'm going to have a cylinder here and a cylinder here. I'm going to push this guy over here. For the legs again, I'm going to have a cylinder here, and I'm going to have a cylinder here. And I'm going to push this a little bit inside. Same thing with this and this, and push this inside. So this is the form that we're working with. I'm going to mark the joints that are going to be very crucial in this figure. These are all the joints that we're going to talk about and where each of them forms. Okay. So now what is this? I kept saying cylinder, but does this look like a cylinder? Not really, but this is from the front. So the whole idea of this cylinder, and I'm going to let's start this over here. The whole idea of this cylinder is that if I have, this is what I look at it when I'm seeing it from the front, right? If my eyes are here, this is how I see it. If I see, so from, if my eyes are in front, wait, let me just, sorry if I confused you guys. Just kind of like that. All right. So if my eyes are here, this is my cylinder, and this is the center line. So then from the front, this will look exactly like this. Right? This is what I'm seeing from the front. If my cylinder bends towards me now, right? Then from the front, what I'm seeing is the top of the shape. If my cylinder bends away from me, and this is the hinge here, if my cylinder bends away from me, then of course what I'm seeing in the front is this. Alright, so this is my cross section, and these are parallel lines. This and this are parallel. This and this are parallel. So these are parallel lines as we kind of understand how the cylinder rotates. So this is coming towards me, this is going away from me, right? So then I'm going to see the bottom of this cylinder, and here I'm going to see the top of the cylinder. Now this becomes very crucial for me to understand forward bend, sideways bend, and where each part of my body moves. Now this also applies to now my arms and legs. So if I'm having a hand that is straight, I'm going to knock this guy off. Right? If I have an arm that is completely straight and I keep my joints here, and now this arm needs to come towards me, right? So basically from a straight arm like this, I'm going to now move this arm like this, like with a little bend over here, right? So then this is what I'm seeing. See how this top curves up? I'll see probably the top of this, and then I'm obviously this is overlapping this, the second one, this is 1 and 2. So 1 is here, 2 is overlapping and coming in front, and then I have the hand, right? So this tells me that this has overlapped. If I were to look at it from the back, so now if I'm looking at this like this, and then from the back, which is moving away from me, then this would be, because this has turned this way, this would be a full cylinder here. And this is now being overlapped. So this is another opening that I see, and this is. And then I have my fist in front, right? So this is why the cylinders become very important for me to understand very quickly. You can see this one is coming towards me, and this one is going away from me. This same thing will apply also to the legs. Now, one very, very crucial thing to remember when we are doing this, I'll just knock all this off. The hinges cannot move. So we spoke about the hinges earlier. We spoke about the hinges in this. This is also one hinge, right? The hinges cannot move at any point. So it's like this. If this is the two surfaces that are cutting my body or my joint, my hinges are constantly going to do this that way, right? It's going to constantly move on the surface. So it's doing this. You cannot have your hinge do this. This cannot happen, right? I'm going to show this in the drawing. You cannot move these surfaces away from each other. What that means is that if this is my object, then when I bend this forward, this will be like this, right? If you do this, if you do this, then this would be wrong, right? This would be correct. Because this is now going to change. The reason that's wrong is if I'm going to have a bend, I'm going to be able to do this, right? If I have this shifting, my bend has moved out. It's going to be very difficult for me to understand what my form is going to look like if my bend is going to move in that way. All right. So I hope this is clear to everyone because this is a very important part. This is where your knees and elbow and everything else that is going to form between those two shapes work. So if I have a body that's bending towards me, then I'm going to have this. Right, this is a body that's bending towards me. And this is a body that's bending away from me. But I still have the hip in front. This is where my hinge is. See how where I'm attaching that hinge? And this is moving away from it. Now, this is provided that you're looking at the body straight, always, right? So, in this case, this is my eye line, and I'm watching everything in this angle straight ahead. So, you're looking completely straight into the object. Now, if you're slightly, even though this leg is straight over here, if I were to draw the legs, I would see a little bit of a curve now as it's moving down. Because these things, like let's look at it this way. This is my object. These are my legs, right? My eye is on this line, right? So if my eye is on this line, all of this is below me. All of this is above me, but there's not much going above. So even if I'm keeping my hand, everything, this will move back if I'm lifting my arm up and I'm going to bend it backwards, right? In your body, try as much as you can, and this is again a very important part, try as much as you can to keep it completely straight, right? If I'm going backwards, and you find me repeating this over and over because this is something that I've noticed a lot of students making a mistake with when they start drawing. This is forward. Sorry. All right. Try not to do this. Unless you're working with perspective, which probably we are not talking about yet. Try not to do this if you do not have perspective in your objects. So that would be this. Try not to do something like this. So these would be wrong if you do not have perspective. The only time you would see a cylinder go from here to here is if you're going to add perspective into your drawings, right? And that is if it's really shortening in a certain way. Otherwise, you're going to try and keep it as simple as you can. So these would be completely wrong if you do not have perspective. All right. Another thing to keep in mind is skewing. Now, what is skewing? Let's talk about that. Skewing is if you take this box and if I do this, do not skew your cylinders, because if you start doing this, and where this comes up is like if someone's going bending backwards. I've seen a lot of students do this, bending backwards, they'll draw this line, they'll draw this line, and then this becomes straight. This is skewing. If you do this, your entire drawing is set up for mistakes, right? If you kind of start doing this, if you will figure out that everything that you build from here on is going to be a problem. So Ranjit says, but isn't perspective a default? No, perspective should not be a default at this stage, because you don't know what kind of a character you're drawing. Say, for example, you're going to draw someone sit down, or you're going to draw someone just purely standing and having a conversation. There is very little relative perspective that is happening. Like there might be, if this is my frame, and I have one character here and then one character here, of course there is perspective between this guy and this guy. But within him, there is not much perspective. You won't have him moving away from you, right? His hands and his body is not getting, like in this frame, if I blow that up, right, I won't see perspective kind of coming here, which I've seen a lot of students draw, right? You can't start skewing this and bending this like, oh, I want broader chest, so I'm going to make this wider, and then I'm going to make this smaller. This is a sign of perspective. And in this figure here, that perspective should not be there, right? Because then you're starting to make this guy go thinner here, which means there is downward perspective. It starts skewing. It's like a fisheye lens, which you don't want. If I have a character like this, and then I'm like I drew earlier, I'm going to have someone maybe throw a punch at me from with his arm behind, and this hand is coming in front, right? Let's kind of draw that. Now here there is a lot of perspective, right? If I do something like this here, there is a lot of perspective, because I'm going to now have this in a conical form, then the one below in a further conical form, and then these legs are forming smaller, this is going down, this is going even more lower. But this is a specific case of where the image is perspective. Now if I take this same thing, and my character is having a coffee conversation, where he's holding this cup of coffee, right? There is no perspective in this, right? So in this, there is absolutely no difference between this arm and this arm. And if I start in this case, if I start, let's say, instead of drawing my arm like this, which is a straight cylinder, because we are not talking about anatomy yet. When we talk about anatomy, we will skew them. But in cylinder form, if I make this kind of a change, where I take this and I say, oh, I'm going to do this, this is a sign of perspective to me, where it shouldn't be. So I hope that answers your question. What is the best advice for someone who has lost their drawing skills? If you've lost, you can't lose something that is a skill like that, because you can just keep practicing. The more you practice, now if I don't practice for about 2 months, it's going to be very difficult for me to come back and draw as comfortably as I'm probably drawing right now. But if I draw every day, then you will definitely be able to maintain the skill. It's like anything else that you do, right? If you do it every day, you're going to be good at it. If you're not going to do it every day, then of course your growth will be that much slower. You will forget, and you will have to kind of get your muscles used to it all over again. Neha Kumari says, when the body or hands move forward or backward, do I focus on change of size of the part as well at this level? No, you do not focus on the change of size. So let's say this you focus on. So I don't know if I've understood your question correctly, but if I'm going to do this now, of course, this cylinder is like that. If this is going backwards, then this will of course become smaller. But I would suggest not to make this in perspective at this point. So this is something that you will definitely change shape, but don't change shape in perspective, which would happen if my camera lens is going to do that much. We will get to this as you kind of, the more you practice and the more you understand basic forms. If you do not deform the forms to begin with, then you can start deforming them when you start adding perspective to it, right? So yeah, if the camera viewer moves closer to the cup, perspective comes. Of course, yes. So Chila, you're right. If the camera or viewer moves closer to the cup, perspective comes into the picture. That is correct. If I start like if this is the camera here and my camera starts moving, that depends on the lens of the camera. I can have the cup completely flat here also, depending on whether my lens is set that way. But if I'm going to use a wide angle, then of course this cup and camera and everyone in this will start looking. So I can have this, and then this guy is holding it, and then his head is somewhere here. And he's having that conversation where his other hand has become super small. Right? So this is what you mean. The cup has come very close to me. But you can also have this entire frame depending on the lens. And this is something where we are faking a lens while drawing. This cup can be in this position, and then of course I don't see the rest of him, right? I don't see anything else because it's just close up of the cup. So it depends what you're doing with your frame. Your choice of lens is always very important when you draw this. Okay, what are the questions? If the camera. Okay, so graphic tablet really doesn't. I use a Cintiq, but you can use any Intuos or XP Pen or BAM, like what is that, Eyeball or any of these tablets that you can choose anything that you're comfortable with. It really doesn't matter once your skill starts improving. It really doesn't matter what kind of a device you're using, as long as you're not using the mouse, of course. I know some people who draw with the mouse, but that's crazy difficult, right? Um, so let's see, what are we talking about now? So another thing to kind of keep in mind is when you do these cylinders, something I've again noticed with a lot of students, don't add a gap, because this will help you bend correctly. Right? This will help you bend as correctly as you can. If you add a gap, now I don't know where my elbow is, right? If I were to draw on top of this, in this, I know exactly where my elbow is. It's in the middle of both of these. And I know where this joint is. But now my elbow could be here, my elbow could be here, right? It could go anywhere from there. So try as much as possible not to add a gap. This becomes a very smooth curve, and then you'll kind of lose the ability to draw wrinkles and things like that. Where I've seen this commonly as a problem is when people draw the torso, and they'll set this up, right? And then they'll do this. So in this case, I don't know what these markers are. The reason we kind of stick them together is because you will be able to understand over as we kind of move through the sessions that if this is my chest, I know that this is where it starts bending. So my torso will begin around here. But if I do this gap that you're kind of seeing right now, then I don't know where this is ending. This can be a very smooth bend. I want my character to bend a lot, but this is smooth. If I had done the same thing without that gap, right? If I do the same thing without the gap, my bend is tighter now. But if I want the same kind of bend now in this guy, I will have to take this cylinder even further. And then then the whole point of cylinders is gone. The reason you're kind of building it up in this fashion is completely lost if you do not stick them together. So always try to remember to stick your cylinders together. Always use the hinges. So your hinges are on this entire surface here, which means that you will always, sorry if I'm being repetitive, guys, but I know I have seen from my experience how many times people forget this. The hinges are always going to be along this. This especially applies to this part here. Now, here's a common mistake I've seen again. If someone's raising their hand up, I've seen a lot of students draw this, right? Because that also looks like a cylinder and it's a hinge that's moving up. So a lot of students, I've seen them kind of raise their hand like this. Let me draw this here. Right? So I've seen a lot of students do this. Now, what the problem with this is, I have my head, I'll draw my neck, and then this just goes up. But there is no offset, so both shoulders will end up looking the same. Why is this wrong? If I actually draw this with the right hinge that we've spoken about, let's get the same guy here, right? And the hinge is here, right? So this means right? That will help me understand that this shoulder is down, but this shoulder is now squeezed up. Which is what happens when you lift your arm. When you lift your arm, see how this is squeezing up? That squeeze I'm going to lose if I keep my hinge down, if I don't get the right hinge. So I hope this is also clear to everyone. This is going to be a very common mistake in a lot of drawings. This has to kind of squeeze up and go in. That's when you'll start seeing less of a gap around here. Otherwise, you will just kind of see this build from there. We're going to talk about one more common mistake on the hip that a lot of people do. Let's say I'm drawing a setting pose. Let me see if there are any questions. What advice will you give for visual development? Draw as much as you can. Look at people, like other people's artwork, to see what they're doing. There is something called master studies where you can kind of look at each person's artwork and try to imitate it so that you can learn what they're trying to do. Look at a lot of photographs and don't color pick, but try to identify the color and paint as much so that your understanding of color improves. And watch a lot of films, same thing. These will all help you. Tony says Ranjit says, in your top drawing of the cup, the lines and notice are all straight. I'm not sure what I drew because that was also very rough and fast. Maybe if I draw it again and maybe if you can point it out, we'll see what can happen. Rahul says, can you give some tips for drawing hand? It's okay. So we're definitely going to do hand. So just a quick overview, slight deviation from this class. Today's session is about cylinders and forms. We're going to do one more session that is going to be about rhythm and flow. And then we're going to do another session on anatomy, which is going to be broken down into 4 sessions, which is going to be the first session will be just the head and the neck. The second session will be torso, The third session will be arms and legs. And the fourth session is going to be hands and feet. All right. So I hope that answers your question. We won't talk about hands today, but this is how we're planning to do more sessions in the future. All right. So we will talk about, okay, people ask, I think people are jumping a little ahead. This, like I mentioned, is a very basic beginner class. We will do more sessions where we will talk about all of this stuff. So here's another thing that I've seen a lot of people make a mistake of. This is my hip, right? This is this guy from the side. What I've seen in for a lot of people doing with this is when they want to show a person sitting down, they will do this. This is again wrong. The reason being that you've lost your entire length of the leg. If you're planning a character that works in a certain size and ratio, you've lost the entire length of the character. Plus, you've lost any semblance of where the joint for different parts should be. The right way of doing something like this would be, if this is my hip, sorry, I shouldn't have drawn this sideline on both. This is my hip. This is how I'm going to be sitting down. Right? What this allows me to do, if I draw over this, is the first one is wrong because this looks like I don't know where this joint is. Right? This again, I don't know where this joint for this leg is. Let's say I'm doing an animation with just cylinders. I don't know how this is going to straighten up now because the joint is lost in both cases. And I get my knee. What this helps me with is that I know exactly where my joints are. So if I'm animating, I know exactly how this is going to move and all of that, right? So I hope this much is clear. These are all the kind of mistakes and things that a lot of people make when they kind of do cylinders. It looks easy, but when we start drawing, we realize that these are going to be difficult, right? When will you talk about foreshortening? We're not going to discuss foreshortening right now because foreshortening will have its own little session. I feel like people jump too fast into perspectives when they should be focusing a little bit more on the basics. Foreshortening is possible if you just understand basic perspective, right? If I have a cylinder that's over here and I have a cylinder right next to it over here, let's delete this. Foreshortening is very simple if you can just use the same concept of basic perspective. If you understand 1 point, 2 point perspective, foreshortening becomes very easy. Let's say I have these kind of in isometric. I'm going to place these here. So these are all in one line. This is without any perspective, right? All are the same size. If I draw this in perspective, I'm going to have something that goes down, right? So this is simple perspective, simple 1 point perspective that we kind of understand. Foreshortening is just that. Now if I have, let's say I'm doing this with my hand. Now how far do I want to move this hand back? If I do not do any perspective, then this is what my arm looks like. This is moving behind. If I add perspective, what does a cylinder look like in perspective? A cylinder will look like this, right? We understand that. Now everything is moving backward, which means this cylinder will move backwards. Right now I don't see the top of this because it's going away from me. And then I'm going to have this cylinder start around the same place, and then this is going away from me. And that's pretty much how foreshortening works. If you can understand, what I suggest with all my students is do not think about a human figure as a human figure. Think about a human figure in terms of cylinders, blocks, spheres. and it will become much more easier for you to construct your human figures. So I hope that was helpful. We're going to do a small little thing that I would like you guys to try as an exercise. This is something that helped me, and this is something that will definitely help you guys. Whatever. So these are largely, I think I've kind of. There's one more thing to kind of talk about. Sorry. Elbows, we can do whatever we want. Our hands will move in whatever direction we want with elbows. The legs are not the same. If you look at your leg, and I want you all to try this out with your leg, right? Let's say this is your leg, right? If this is my leg over here, try moving your leg this way and this way, right? Now my hand very comfortably moves and you see nothing happening on the elbow. Now try doing the same thing with your leg and you'll notice something very peculiar. This is my leg, right? And let's leave a little bit of gap over here so that I can see my knee, so that it feels like an open knee. And I'm going to slightly taper this so that I know it's moving in perspective. Now this opening tells me that my knee is here, right? Which means my foot can only be here. You cannot do this, like your foot cannot be, you cannot have your foot facing this side with a knee that is in front. If while you're talking, if you've tried this with your leg, you'll notice that your leg has about 5 degrees range of motion. Beyond 5 degrees, your entire leg and your knee, everything starts moving around it, right? So this is something to watch out for when you do feet, when you're trying to do this with cylinders. Your foot has to be in the same place. If I want my feet to go here, let's say I want my feet to be planted like this, then all of this changes. This will open up. This will open up like this. This will open up around here. This will go here. And then my foot will be on this side. So that now my new knee is over here. Right? I hope this was clear. This is a little confusing for some people. It's just that your knee does not have that range of motion. Sorry, your foot does not have that range of motion. It will always take your knee and your leg along with it. Right? So this is something to remember when you try constructing your poses. Now, so we're going to try, these are all the basic things that go with cylinders, and we're kind of about 45 minutes in. So we'll talk about something, a way to practice this for the next 15 minutes. Right? There are 3 exercises that you can do with these kind of characters. So I'm going to load up one of these references. I'm going to, let's see, I'm going to open up my desktop. I'm going to take one of these references. Let's probably say this one, right? And I'm going to say insert in the reference image. I'm going to leave this on the side here. So I'm going to probably just have her maybe standing here while I look at this image. All right. So there are 3 kinds of exercises that you can do so that you can understand this a little better. The first kind of exercise is to take your image. Where is it? Let's. Sorry. Forget how to move this sometimes. Where is that move tool? Sorry guys, sorry about this. Okay, let's go. So we're going to keep that image there. I'm going to load this up again so that I can see it here. Sorry, I'm not fully familiar with Krita. Sometimes it kind of tricks me into things. I'm going to open that image on the side. So we have this image. So one kind of exercise that you can do to begin understanding what happens and how the body functions is to start tracing over this, right? So, right, you kind of just draw whatever we spoke about. These follow the same rules, and then you have this same thing you do over here. This was from the first session. Same thing you do over here. This is just so you understand this as you draw. And this is the first exercise that you can try. This is the same thing. Just so you know exactly where the joints are and where things are moving from. Okay. The second exercise that you can, sorry, this is the first part of it. What you can add to this is now we talk about the cylinders, right? So we've seen this is the hip. Hip is not moving anywhere. We already know the direction. So we're going to build this hip here, right around here. We're going to build it here. And this is moving in this direction. So I'm going to take this form and this form, which is twisting. You see this center line is here. You twist this center line here, right? So I can get this hinge, and your cylinders will go outside the body. When we come to anatomy, you can you can always move these shapes around a little bit, but your cylinders right now will move out of the body. And same thing, see how this is raised? That's because this is going above my cylinder, my shape. I'm not drawing the shoulders, and this is where my cylinder ends. This is open on this side, this is open on this side, and this comes down. Alright, same thing, this entire thing has gone behind. So I won't even see it. I'm gonna kind of, this is where my hip hinges. So see where this is why I said don't slide your hinges. So Ranjit is asking, do we give links for these? No, this is just Google. I just Googled them, looked for figure drawing references, and I found some images that I can work with. This is where I see the face of this cylinder looking at me. I'm going to see the face of the bottom cylinder also, and then move them down. Same thing I'm going to try over here. This is a slightly upward facing chest. So I'm going to get that line in. I'm going to move this line here. I'm going to draw this here. Just so you understand what these shapes look like. And this is the center line, so you know that you're accurate on the center line. So this is fairly straight looking at me. This is where I'm seeing my thigh come out. This is where I'm seeing this hinge going straight down. All right. This is the hinge on this arm, so it's kind of almost on a straight line. You see how this is lifted up and this is almost flat. That's why the hinge is very important. And we're going to move this here. We're going to talk about this. And these are straight, right? This one is slightly bent towards me, so I'm going to see the form of that. All right. And so this is how you kind of, so sorry, my mistakes. Ranjit, you're right. I'm used to kind of moving ahead because of these things, but yes, while you guys are practicing, keep it straight. Also, because we're tracing on this, it may be fine to kind of draw it tapered, but preferably don't draw it tapered. Keep it straight. The human form is tapered. If I draw just the fingers and stuff, but while we're doing cylinders, we keep it fairly straight so that we understand how these mechanics are moving around. Ranjit, thank you for pointing that out. So this is the first exercise. This is exercise number 1, right? The second exercise, we go back to our previous page for it, is to now look at this image and be able to, not without tracing, understand what is happening, right? So I'm going to draw the direction of the face, that's here, and then I kind of see the neck. I see that this is lifted. I see that this part of it is lifted, so which means that that is above my hand, which means my torso starts here, but my center rib cage is over here. If you can see my mouse cursor, which means this is over here. And this is leaning in this angle like this. So right. Oops. So I'm going to move that around here. Now my hip is kind of going in this direction like that. So I'm going to draw that down here, and the center line is kind of straight. You see that, and then draw. So as you can see, this takes a little longer than just tracing over, but this will teach you what is really going on with the body. As we spoke about, the elbows are on the waistline here, so that's here. This will kind of come out. This is fairly straight and slightly inward, so I'm going to just place that without any tapering around here. All right. Lots of questions. Let me see. One problem I face when I draw on paper, think it will be fast and easy with tablet. And when I start drawing with tablet, I feel like I should go with paper and pencil. And also, I want to get comfortable with tablet just like paper and pencil. So we mentioned this during our last class that that we suggest drawing on paper and pencil to begin with, then move on to paper and pen, and then move on to a digital tablet, because it makes you learn slowly. What digital does is, oh, I did this, oh shit, this is wrong, I just do an undo, and this is a bad habit. It's easier when you know exactly the line that you're drawing and making sure that it is working before, so your head is already finished the drawing and your hand just has to kind of execute it, right? That happens more with paper and pencil. So it's always best to start with paper and pencil and then kind of move up. About getting better in paper and pencil and digital is just a matter of practice. The more you do it, the better you will get. All right. And this is exercise number 2, where you look at something and you try to replicate it as best as you can. Now, exercise number 3 that I would like you guys to do is you knock off all references. Maybe how do I shut down my references? And I try to create a character from scratch. Now, this is where I'm trying to do memory drawing. So I'm going to sit down, I'm going to move, I'm going to think about, okay, so I'm going to stand, and I'm going to stand like this, maybe with my hip really sticking out to one side. Maybe that's it. So I'm going to try to probably stand like this with my hip really sticking out to one side, and then I'm going to turn this way, right? So my hip is here. Last time we spoke about these pointers. I'm going to turn this way. So you see my hip is still here, my body is facing that way. So I'm going to try to draw that now. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is maybe my elbow, my shoulders, and then it bends like this because I want that bend. This is my weight bearing leg, which we spoke about. Right? And I'm going to try to keep getting into that pose and try to keep moving and seeing what is happening. So my hip had only moved this much, right? So I'm going to get that in. My chest moved this much, so I'm going to get that in. So I understand where these are, and then I know that this bent like this. So this is going here, this is upward. This is almost straight, or maybe even. So when do I see the top of that hip? If I'm standing like this, and if I do this, if I'm going to push my butt back like that, then I'm going to see a little bit of the top of the hip, right? So then I'm going to kind of see a little bit of the top of the hip. And then the hinges have to be maintained. So this is kind of here. Because of this, seeing there's a little bend here. This means that there's a little bit of a bend there. And I'm going to get this kind of moving down. Same thing with this. I'm going to see this because it's more relaxed. And I'm going to see the top of this a little bit and draw this down. My hands, now where do I want my hands to be? I can decide maybe this person is calling out to someone, so I can hinge this up. Now notice where I'm putting my hinge, and I'm calling someone out, and I'm going to have my head. So I'm calling someone out, and this hand can be maybe forward. So I'm just building, I'm not thinking about a human being. I'm thinking in terms of cylinders and structures so that I can just create these structures moving forward. Right? Maybe I'm holding on to something, I'm saying something with this hand, and just building these structures as I move ahead. So this is exercise number 3. And while I was drawing this, I remembered one thing that was very important that I forgot to mention to you guys. So I'm going to do that on the new layer. These hinges are important over here. Also, they never slide. So I've seen some drawings where the arm is here and the other arm is maybe here, and they've drawn the chest. And then the center line of the chest is here. This is wrong. The center line of the chest and the center line of the hip is always fixed between these 2 points. It will not slide, right? Just because I'm bringing my hand like this and then trying to reach out like that doesn't mean my center line has changed. My center line is still there. So if one arm is here and one arm is trying to reach out from there, from that side, right? That does not mean that my center line has now come here. My center line is still here, right? So be careful about this one small mistake that a lot of people tend to make. I think we're coming to the end of this session. So I hope you remember all 3 exercises that you need to do. Otherwise, you can always watch this video again. If you have any questions, I think we're going to get into the last of the questions. Yes, so exercise 2 will definitely be experimented on boring lectures and classes. That is great. I think drawing is a great way to get through boring lectures and classes. That's what I used to do. About palm drawings, I'm going to again hold up. Like we mentioned, we have a whole breakup of the classes. So when we get to hands and feet is when we'll talk about the hands. Because otherwise that will become a whole another hour of talking about the hands and feet, right? So if you like our videos, of course, please subscribe to all of that good stuff. We provide reviews of your work on Patreon in case you're interested. And I hope you really enjoyed this session. This was also fun for me to record and kind of put together. This was fun so that I can help a lot more of you guys learn to draw so that we can do better artwork, I think, overall. If you have any questions, please put them up on the community tab and I'll look at them and maybe answer them in the next live session that we do. Or you can get onto Instagram and kind of shoot us questions and we'll make sure that we cover them in the next live video. Please share this with everyone that you know. We'd love to increase our audience and help more people learn how to draw human figures, right? Will be easier. Yes, a little more light. I'll definitely do that. I'll see if I can add more light when I stand up. Maybe I'll switch on the light at the end. Thank you all for attending. This has been great. I think we've all managed to last an entire hour, and that's amazing. So until the next class, which we will be announcing on Instagram, we'll announce the next class on Instagram. So stay tuned for that. We'll see you guys soon. Yeah. Thank you so much, guys. Mm.